Hey, welcome to another go-around of STV. On this week's show, in the Shop Hustle, it's all about needs and wants because the Dragon, well, it needs a new track and it's getting it. Plus, we got our shocks back from Accelerated Technologies and they're going on as well because I want to ride it. Then we have the Arctic Cat El Tigre up for a burn. Plus, we look at the 2018 crop of SnoCross race sleds and the teams that race them. So let's send it. STV has been brought to you by Yamaha. Conquer snow with Yamaha. Ford F-Series, Canada's best-selling line of trucks for 52 years. Tough, smart, capable. Kimpex, fueled by fun. Snowmobile racing is all about excitement and pizzazz, but it also adds innovation and technology to our snowmobiling world because it's not just about what wins on Sunday sells on Monday, it's also about building better sleds for you and me.
Bailey Motorsports, big family, started off really small and has become one family. When you ride for Bailey Motorsports, you are family. The 2018 Skidoo Rs600, I was a little apprehensive at first, learning that they were bringing out the E-Tech, but after spending a week in Duluth testing them, they're an awesome unit. I basically had to reinvent the wheel. Had no idea on setups, had no idea on anything with the E-Tech, but Skidoo worked really close with me. Helped me a lot in Duluth, and it made the transition to the 18 really simple. The key new feature to the 2018 RS600, horsepower. We finally have horsepower.
When I first saw the 2018 race sled when they released it at Heydays, I was pretty excited. It was a completely different chassis and platform. We've been kind of running with the same chassis since 2008 was the XP chassis, and they've changed the plastics a little bit, but since then it's been pretty much the same sled. So for a huge change, I was excited to ride it. Also a little bit nervous because there's a new motor and a new chassis in the same year, so I know there would be a lot of getting used to it and a lot of learning, but I was excited to finally get to ride it.
The Skidoo stepped up a lot this year with the whole new basically sled for us to ride this year, and it's been nothing but positive so far. We've been down to Duluth and had a week of practice on these things, and it was almost instant. You could tell. They're faster, they're more nimble. The suspension setup we have this year is on lock. We're way more comfortable. Feeling the change of the E-Tech to the traditional sleds from the years past, you could almost right away feel that there was a difference. You could feel the power almost instantly rather than the years past. It wasn't like right there. You could, in this sled, you get on the throttle, you feel it. You know that it's more powerful, and that's just from years of experience, but anyone that's gonna hop on the sled is gonna say that it is fast, and they're gonna know that. But riders are definitely gonna hop on it and know that it's more than just fast. It is a step up above from years past. I see a lot of technology from our race sleds that are already in the trail sleds and the consumer-based like Skidoo snowmobiles that you can get. I think that a lot of technology is already in them that we kind of adapted to, like the E-Tech. And it's nice to see that some of the Skidoo parts are going onto the trail sled so that the everyday person can feel more like they are getting the best of the best stuff.
It really started as a family thing, just something to do on weekends, and quickly grew from there. We get a lot of support being where we are in this industry as a dealer, so it's nice to help kind of keep our name out there. It's a good marketing tool for us, as well as it's a nice way for us to support other people in the industry and kind of give back to those who help support us and help us do what we do. Arctic Cat learns a lot from their racing efforts and the time they spend on race sleds and development, and You look at the new Procross chassis, it came out in 2012, that was a direct effort from their racing efforts in the previous generation of race sleds. And even from then, that sled and that chassis has come a long way in refinements, and I believe a big part of that has been from what they've learned on the racetrack, and as well as on the trails, but a lot of that starts at the racetrack.
In Sport 1 and Sport 2, we ride a 600 snowmobile, and it's pretty much all stock except for a couple of modifications that you can make. Put some stomp grips on the running boards and different hand grips, and adjust the handlebar riser how you like it. And it's basically out of the box, it's stock and ready to rip. This year the Arctic Cat sled, it's amazing. So much power, it turns a lot better than last year, it jumps better, it's more balanced, it's lighter. I really like the long track on the new sled. It's a lot more traction, and it even turns better with the longer track. Yeah, it's definitely the best sled I've ever ridden as a package, right out of the crate.
Yeah, this year Arctic Cat has made a lot of changes to the race sled. I'm really excited. They went to the long track. We've rode it once so far. Really impressed with it. A lot more balanced in the air than last year, and just a lot more power I've found. Second year of EFI, so they got a bit of the kinks worked out, and it's going to be the top contender this year, I think. This year is kind of a little funny. They've actually used a little bit of the trail technology onto the race sled, and especially specifically in the A-arms. They're actually using mountain A-arms that has been around for a little bit, but we've never used on the race sleds. So in this case, it kind of went backwards. But for the most part, definitely a lot of the parts that we see on the race sleds, it's normally probably 3 or 4 years down the line, but they eventually make its way over to the trail sleds. Arctic Cat's, it is a different brand for sure. Definitely some die-hard people. I've been in it my whole life. This is a family dealership for me, Country Corners. So I've kind of grown up in it. I'm probably one of those people. I may be a little bit crazy, but I live and die Arctic Cat and bleed green, so.
Huber Motorsports is solely based just on that family atmosphere of what we've built over the years, and I mean it's been great. So the sleds we're running this year, Polaris IQ 600, great sleds. I mean, we've been on for 3 years now. The things are just bulletproof, but they actually went ahead and changed these little things that make a huge difference for us. Like they cut some holes in the running boards, put some traction cleats down so it gets rid of snow and now you have grip. Other than that, I mean, the plastics, they changed those last year, and it's a super small thing you'd think, but being able to get over the sled, to corner it, and I mean, it looks unreal, of course, with the new Axis look. The sled's great. I mean, the motor's great, strong, and they haven't changed, I don't think, anything in the motor in the last 10 years, but it works, so why change something?
Yeah, you know, I was actually on Polaris in my younger years growing up, so it's kind of a little bit like coming back home, if you will. The sled is really good, so I've enjoyed it so far. And the group of people that I've been fortunate enough to be with, it makes the world of a difference. So it's been an overall really good transition for me, and it feels good to be on the Polaris sled. For me, you know, right away I jumped on it, it felt really good. It's a very durable snowmobile compared to certain other models, and there's you know, features about it that I really enjoy. You can really beat on them, which is a feature that I like. Just suits my riding style, if you will. Manufacturers have made these sleds so much better, coming stock this year with the new rule changes. So, I mean, we're just improving off of something that's already very good.
Riding with Dave that's the level I'd like to get to, and hopefully one day I'll pass him rather than him passing me. But definitely, that's the speed I need to get to, and yeah, the 2018 Polaris is awesome. They're a great snowmobile. They hold together very well, and they're strong, powerful. They corner absolutely amazing. They corner like a dream, like nothing else I've ever ridden, and I have a blast on them.
I found the change from an Arctic Cat to Polaris actually really good. I thought it wouldn't go as good as it did, so I'm really happy about that. For a female, I feel like they're pretty comfortable. The only thing maybe is my body weight. I need to add a little more mass to turn, but I find my body position on a Polaris is, it feels a lot more comfortable actually. I didn't know how it would work. The seat's a lot lower, and I find your arms are a lot more bent, so it feels kind of more like a dirt bike almost, and it's been really comfortable so far, and I'm sure this season will just get better.
I have to admit, I'm a bit of a sucker for old stuff, or at least when new stuff looks back on its DNA and acknowledges its past. Kind of like the Mustangs, Camaros, and Challengers that take their design cues from back in the pony car days. Another thing I really like is when modern brands take an iconic name from their past and badge a new model with it. Kind of like Arctic Cat El Tigre. For model year 2018, the El Tigre name is not new. It's been boogieing up and down the trails for a couple of years now, but it has solidified itself as a model that can live up to its namesake. Trying to inject life into something with an iconic name can be a risky move, because what if that something sucks? If it does, you run the risk of ruining the reputation of that name. Now, I don't think you needed to be an Arctic Cat faithful to wonder whether or not Arctic Cat was making the right move bringing back the El Tigre name. But at this point, I don't think anybody's thinking that this name isn't exactly where it should be. The El Tigre is built on the Procross chassis and steps up the ZR's list of standard features with extras that specifically target the high-end trail rider and the accessories that they want. That list starts with an 11-inch windshield, rear tunnel bag for extra storage, and a complement of Fox QS3 shocks. Plus, for me, the whole package is rooted in the 70s retro decals that make this ride's exclusivity stand out in a crowd. Now for the bad part. The El Tigre is a spring special order package only, so don't expect to sashay down to your local cat dealer to bring one of these buggies home on a whim. Which is fine with me, because if Arctic Cat blasted Tigers out of the factory like Chiclets, well, that would ruin the name as well. Thankfully, Cat has been faithful to the lineage of the El Tigre with all the moves they've been making with this model's accessories and graphics. But even that goodness wouldn't be worth its name if the sled wasn't one you could live with on the trails. Good thing, everyone here at the OSM and STV Digs agrees that the El Tigre is a buggy built for the ride. It starts with the C-Tech 2 mill under the bonnet. It's got that great Arctic Cat growl. While not super flicky, the 794 and our 8000 series sled has got great low-end grind out of the hole and pulls like a turbine right up to the big end. Now, we'd like to see a little bit more impatience out of the engine as it builds its RPM, but at the end of the day, this package is predictable on the trail and will still pull at your arms out of the corners. It's also built to reach better fuel and oil consumption targets, which helps in the day-to-day running of this sled. The suspension is also one of the best in the industry at soaking up the trail with the race-inspired front suspension and proven slide action rear skid. Here, the El Tigre package features the Fox QS3 shocks, but on the front arm of the rear skid is a non-adjustable Arctic Cat 1.5-inch IFP shock, while the rear arm gets the 3-position QS3. Out front, the QS3s again have that easy-to-adjust 3-clicker system to further fine-tune the ride quality of the Procross chassis. Ergos on the chassis feature a good wide seat that you can stretch out on and then transition to a more up on the tank position, which is when this chassis really starts to perform. Another detail, while not new for this year, is a redesigned grip that's just a bit smaller to help with your hold on the bars. Plus, this small detail helps when you get on the binders with the SnoCross style brake lever. The El Tigre is now deep into its return into the mainstream snowmobile market. It has had and it does live up to its namesake. Now, I suppose Cat could have just added a bunch of alphabet soup letters and numbers to the ZR name this sled is built from, but somehow, I just don't think this machine would have been the same without the heritage of the El Tigre name. The Polaris Dragon is all about needs and wants to get it back on the trail. It needed a new suspension, so we had the shocks rebuilt, and we're going to put those together today. It also needed a new track, which I found on Kijiji for $200, so I can't go wrong there. It also needs new skis. Don't have them yet, but I want to ride it, so we're going to finish our rebuild with this stuff and then hit the trail. When we really get down to it, the problems with the Dragon were quite minor. While normally, at a dealership, a sled like this would have been sold with these problems already taken care of, our purchase price reflected the fact that it had some issues, the biggest one being the track. We started with the shock rebuild though, really the only thing we couldn't do ourselves. John at Accelerated Technologies took care of us with the rebuild. Now for the age, they weren't too bad, but he did find some small problems, so the rebuild was worthwhile. If a shock rebuild is something you think your sled needs, it's only some nuts and bolts to get the shocks in or out. The hardest part is the rear suspension re, but even that's not too bad. For our Dragon, I've reassembled the shocks inside the skid and also on the front suspension. Just remember, like any time you twist wrenches, double check to make sure all your nuts are tight before you consider any job done. Also, while the skid was out, I changed out the high axis for new ones, greased the pivot points, and checked all the bogey bearings, which were surprisingly all good. Now for my favorite part. Well, no, not really. The track. This is a pretty integral part of a sled, with a bunch of bits in the way and holding it in there. The main highlight of the track removal is getting the drive axle out, which involves opening up the chain case to get the lower gear off. Now this usually requires removing the exhaust as well. Getting the track out is probably one of the worst jobs about this whole thing. You do have to take a lot of things apart, just be careful to keep the parts in order and it should go back together just fine. You do have to dig for a while though. On the opposite side, you need to remove the bearing and its mount, which probably means the secondary clutch needs to be removed to gain access. Now getting in there is not too bad on older sleds like the Dragon, but some of the new stuff, this area is quite packed in. I'm not going to go through a step-by-step how-to for the track, that would take too long. And if you feel you can do this job, you could probably figure it out on your own. But it may sound weird, YouTube has some pretty good tutorials if you're into it. Another little detail to watch for, anytime you're dealing with your secondary, there may be shims like these guys that align both the secondary and primary clutch. So you want to be careful you don't lose those. Keeping track of small details like the shims or the orientation of parts as you remove them will make reassembly much easier. Take pictures if you need to. With that all out of the way, the axle will easily fall out of the chassis and the track right behind it.
I win.
As easy as that sounded, the sled goes back together with about the same amount of difficulty. But the mistake I made was not stretching out the track. Being rolled up for who knows how long turned out to be a bit of an issue, especially getting the skid frame back in. Please pause while we curse, swear, and bleed. So it might seem a little bit strange, but a ratchet strap is actually your friend when it comes to installing a skid frame, because you can kind of pull it around and line up all your mounting holes. It's way easier than just struggling. With the suspension put back in, the last details are to add oil to the chain case, very important not to forget this step, and to tension and align the track. And speaking of the track, it's an old Kimpex one I bought on Kijiji for 200 bucks. So I still have to find skis for the Dragon, but at this point, this thing is a functioning snowmobile, and now I want to ride it. So today's the first day for the ride on the old blister, I mean Dragon. We fixed everything that needed to be fixed, except for the skis, they're still junk. But other than that, we're ready to go. But to make things interesting, I haven't done anything else to it. I mean, we haven't cleaned it, we haven't taken the tank bag off the back, the shocks that we got rebuilt, we just guessed on the preload setup. Everything, even the oil and the gas in the tank is exactly the way we picked it up from the dealer. So now it's time to ride it. I wanted to see what this thing was like as is, then work with the adjustments available to me to tune the sled into the way I want to ride it. There's really not that much to do, but I think one of the first things I want to do is move the handlebars. I bet the last owner to ride this Dragon was all stretched out because of the position of the bars. I mean, they're way to the back, which for me is actually a good sign because somebody who rides like this is probably not pounding the sled too hard, as compared to somebody who rides with their risers right up, that is. But I hope the Dragon's up to it because its life's about to change. With the bars moved forward, the Dragon is instantly easier to ride up on the tank, allowing me to shift my weight better over the center of the sled. This also seemed to settle the sled's front suspension a bit with my weight further forward. Now I didn't want to make too many changes all at once, and I wanted my riding position sorted out before I moved on to the suspension, which is next and definitely needs some tuning. Even though I guessed at preload, the rear is actually pretty good. Now it wasn't brilliance on my end. Preload is set full soft on both the front and rear arms. Now I know I'll probably have to wind in some preload on the front spring and rear cams when the trails get a bit more warped out, but for today, these trails are super smooth and hard. Even though my ride-in might be a little more than I would normally have, it's working in these conditions. The front is a little bit more dodgy. The hard conditions are fighting the current setup on the Dragon, so I've been playing with preloads and compression damping. I've tried adding both more spring and compression than taking spring and compression out, but the Dragon seems to be liking a little more spring preload and less compression compared to where I started. Now the front is starting to get a little bit more predictable. Now I'm sure the setup's going to change as conditions do, but for right now, I'm pretty happy with the Dragon, so I'm just going to pound some miles. I'm actually starting to hope that I remember to tighten all the nuts and bolts I had off, but for the moment, everything seems to be staying together, so I'm only going to worry about that problem if it becomes one, because I am digging the Dragon. Yeah, it feels a bit old school compared to jumping off a new XCR, but I already knew it would. It's not like I'm disappointed by that fact. The purpose of the Dragon was not to buy a sled for less than 4K that would outperform a new XCR. That would be silly. Instead, I wanted to show that for around 4K, you could buy a sled like the Dragon that would give you the snowmobile experience that we were all passionate about without spending XCR money. It's not like I'm telling you not to go out and buy a new XCR. If you've got that XCR money, please by all means go buy an XCR. You won't be disappointed. But not everyone can afford these new buggies. And that fact should not keep you from becoming a snowmobiler. A used sled like the Dragon should be good enough and reliable enough to give you that snowmobiling experience that we're all passionate about without spending that $20,000 to buy a new sled. But for right now, I've got a lot of season ahead of me with the Dragon, and I do plan on riding this buggy. Don't go away because I almost said it.